The use of armed drones is quietly reshaping warfare across Africa. Once the preserve of superpowers and high-tech militaries, drones are now increasingly being used in internal conflicts on the continent, in the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, the Great Lakes, and beyond. Countries under pressure from insurgency, jihadist groups, ethnic conflict, or even civil war have begun acquiring medium-altitude, long-endurance drones, often imported from abroad, hoping to regain control of vast territories, counter asymmetric warfare, and strike at enemies from the air with minimal risk to their own troops. But as the adoption of drones spread, so are warnings from analysts, human rights groups, and civilians on the ground that drone strikes rarely deliver decisive victories and instead can deepen cycles of violence, destabilize communities, and claim innocent lives. Some key questions being asked are drones a force multiplier for African militaries or a dangerous shortcut that worsens conflict? What are the human rights and civilian harm implications when remote drones replace ground operations? Can Africa build the legal, ethical, and institutional framework to govern drone use, or will its skies become a battleground of unaccountable violence? Well, we have to get some perspective, and to help us with that, we're joined by Moses Wambui, CEO, ISS Africa. Thank you very much for obliging us today. To start things off, how prevalent is the use of armed drones, and what's encouraging the spread?
Good evening, Felicity.
Yes, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry for that. I think I'll start with having to thank you for having me. And then the issue of drones is something that you see we started with drones in terms of agriculture, other areas like health and the rest. But now we have already adopted the use of drones in military and security systems. So you find that the penetration rate of drones in Africa is around 14% of the whole drone market in the world. And that goes for around the costs, the initial cost becomes an issue. And so you find that you're talking about an economy of around 8 billion USD in terms of drones. But now the problem that we are having in terms of conflict is that, like you said earlier, that you find you have a problem in terms of target, in terms of maybe weather, in terms of also something like we are lacking regulations, laws that govern. So you're finding it is something new in Africa. And as we adopt them, we need to have the right regulation systems. Felicity?
Yeah, I'm wondering what really is driving this spread. Is it availability? Is it ease of access? What exactly is driving the spread of the continuing use of drones across Africa?
One was something that you find that manpower, like we're talking about security, in terms of military and security being for drones, you find manpower. Governments are finding it easier to use drones and technology, so there's less use of manpower in terms of human manpower. So you find that is one. Number two is the kind of terrain we have. Sometimes if you look areas like Ethiopia, you have areas like the Sahel, Nigeria, when you're dealing with people like the Boko Haram, the time you're dealing with people like Al-Shabaab, you find it is easier to use drones other than using ground forces to attack. Two, you find the issue of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, whereby you're able to gather you're able to gather intelligence using the drones. So I think this one technology is being adopted because it is easier, other than using the manpower.
Any insights as to how these drones are being used in conflicts like in the Sahel, Ethiopia, Sudan? Is it more for surveillance or for strikes? That clarification is important. And then what difference that choice make?
You know, for starters, it was usually most of views of drones was on intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. But as we move forward, we are finding that we are adapting more into also strikes. Why are we? And this is where I think the conflict comes in terms of how targeted or how targeted is those strikes. Will they have human casualties? Like if you're dealing with insurgents, are we sure that when we do drone strikes that we are only targeting the insurgents, or we are also having civilian casualties? So those are very we have gray areas in terms of regulation and in terms of target. So I find it's more of surveillance, but as we are going on in like in 2025, we're finding a lot coming in terms of attack.
What are some of the structural limitations, maybe in terms of terrain, weather, lack of maybe integrated systems and the likes, that might blunt a drone's effectiveness in Africa?
One, because of infrastructure. You find our infrastructure is not still well built. So, like drones, there are a lot that involves having drones. One, the limitation should be infrastructure. Another limitation can be in terms of cost, because even the African countries to afford the initial cost of maybe military drones is very high. Two, the terrain. You find our terrain in Africa is a bit rugged and rough. So you find the use of drones, because maybe like you're talking about the medium altitude, long endurance drones, because you don't have the high, I think, altitude yet in Africa. That's a range of around 10,000 to 30,000 feet. The use of drones. So if you have that kind of a drone, then you're having some kind of limitation in terms of piloting, in terms of surveillance, and in terms of having to control it. So basically, that's why you're finding the penetration not very high.
All right. So the headline for many is, I mean, when you think about drones these days, you think drones equals cheaper, safer, and more precise. Have drones in that term really helped African states secure decisive victories, or do they really alter conflict outcomes?
You see, there's something that you're talking about. You find that our implication is that if you're going to use the drones, then you're going to have a safer, cheaper, targeted, and a well orchestrated kind of strikes. But, and this is what I'm saying, however, you find that in the long run, the human conflict might escalate. Reason being, one, if we have civilian casualties, we are going to have more conflict other than having to solve maybe the insurgents. Two, you might find in the long run the issue of cost, access, because how many countries in Africa are producing drones? I'm trying to see South Africa is trying to do something. We have something in Ethiopia. There's a lot of testing going in terms of Kenya and Rwanda because of the airspace, the access. So you find other areas, the access becomes a problem. So at the end of the day, I don't find it being cheaper and being safer. I find it that it might escalate.
Yeah, when you said earlier that one of the reasons for the use of drones was, to address the issue of manpower use and to save lives, I was just thinking, but is it reflective of the successes or the fight against crime, insecurity, war mongering on the continent? That remains to be seen. But the part that I want you to really speak to is, could drones give a false sense of superiority, maybe undermine ground strategy, intelligence work, and other ways of conflict resolution?
Truth be told, that drones might give a false sense of superiority, because at the end of the day, if, for example, a country is in conflict, let me take an example of dealing with Al-Shabaab. In Kenya, you find that Al-Shabaab is a big problem because of the neighboring country, Somalia. So you find that if you're doing drone strikes, you might end up thinking that you have a good military, a good force. At the end of the day, if technology fails you, then it is giving you a false hope that you're doing something. But at the end of the day, you are not you're not a superior military. So it is a question of let me say, it's a question of the egg and the chicken, which one came first, and that is why technology and the human resource have to go hand in hand. So if it doesn't go hand in hand, then you might end up having a force that is not reliable.
Let's talk human rights. Reports show a growing number of civilian casualties linked to drone strikes in Africa. The one in 2023 here in Nigeria, Kaduna State, is still fresh in our mind. What patterns of harm are emerging, and what can be done to help minimize the human casualty, the civilian casualty of such drones, especially in the use of war?
My take will be in terms of regulations. One, as a country, as a continent, this is something that is coming in as new, quote unquote. So the regulatory framework is still at a very young stage. So you will find, because of lack of proper regulation, you might end up having civilian casualties. This brings in the issue of human rights, but the let's say human rights groups, the technology part, the military, the government, I think they have to develop a proper framework in terms of use of drones, because even flying them is also a conflict by itself, because we are using the airspace. So at the end of the day, when if we are going to solve these problems, then we are going to make sure that we have the right regulations, the right laws are in place, so that we minimize, so that the drones are used for the proper use of drones. Because you might find the government and the insurgents, both of them are using drones. What happens? So who is allowed to use drones? Who is allowed to have the proper access, and how are they regulated? That is a problem, because you might find people are just flying drones without the proper framework.
I mean, I don't know. It's good and bad. And I don't know whether the bad outweighs the good, because are there ways, maybe your answer to this will help, are there ways when drones strike in remote or insurgent-held areas that we can realistically verify targets and prevent civilian deaths?
technology is something you cannot avoid technology, Felicity. So you find that when something new comes, it is adapted. And if you don't adopt technology, at the end of the day, you will rank behind. So ways of making sure, if I say, if you target the Boko Haram, you cannot ascertain for sure that the people who are killed maybe by the drone strike, because actually the kind of drones you are using, that's why I'm saying we're using the male drones, the ones you're calling the medium altitude long endurance drones. And with that, the precision is not as high as when you're using the hail. So I think, one, the cost will be high if by any chance you're going to have realistic use of drones that are very targeted, that have the range is proper, and at the end of the day, what kind of impact that you want to get comes out. So I think for me, you cannot ascertain for sure that you are only dealing with the insurgents.
You talked about laws to regulate it. Do we have such a safeguard? Any? Does it exist in Africa to maybe ensure or manage accountability, especially when we have wrongful drone strikes or the use of drones that is, not authorized?
The accountability for now is very low. And that's why you're going back to what I'm trying to insist about the regulations. However, if you look at it, like Kenya and Rwanda right now, they're doing a very good work in terms of testing, in terms of putting out the kind of regulation that we need. So if by any, you see the airspace for any country is regulated, but at the end of the day, even the manning of airspace in Africa, say the communication and the way you man your airspace is still at a very nascent stage to many countries. So you find yourself, one, you have introduced drone, and also the airspace is not still regulated. So I find it's time that African countries come up together, and those who are testing and those who are manufacturing, like Ethiopia and I say Ethiopia, here South Africa are doing well. So at the end of the day, when you're producing them, then produce them with proper management, proper like aircraft, so that at the end of the day, the use of unregulated drones and network is done away with.
Is it possible to regulate its use? If yes, how?
Yes. Pardon?
I said, is it possible to really regulate the use of drones today? If yes, how for Africa?
I'm saying, one, we have dealt with production. When you because in Africa the level of production, because we are buying drones from Turkey, we are buying drones from China and other countries. So the level of production, so that at the end of the day, there are definitive areas that this is the drone that was produced. One, from manufacturing and use should be the starting point. Then number two is government coming down with proper, because most of the drones are still regulated by the aviation industry. So if there's like here we have in Kenya we have KCA, Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. They have to put in place rules, regulations that govern, so that even owning of drones, leave alone even the military ones, here even were the ones you use for videography and the rest, and agriculture, they should be regulated, because one, they can be misused at any given time.
Beyond governments and non-armed groups also acquiring drones, what does that mean for conflict escalation and state monopoly on violence?
You said beyond? Sorry, you're breaking on that.
Okay, I'll take it again. Beyond governments and non-state rebels, armed groups per se, maybe like militias and the like, also acquiring drones. What does that mean for conflict escalation and state monopoly on violence?
If by any chance, you see, if beyond government, we have non-state actors having drones, one, the armed conflict resolution becomes also a problem, because if, for example, the insurgents are able to have intelligence, they're able to have surveillance, they're able to do reconnaissance and attacks, you see, that becomes a big problem in terms of trying to solve conflicts in areas like, say like we were saying, the Boko Haram, the way we were saying about these other areas like Sahel. Look at areas like Al-Shabaab. If they're able to acquire drones and use them, then we have a big problem in terms of resolving conflicts in Africa. Actually, what happens is escalation. So regulation becomes key in terms of solving armed conflict in Africa. Regulation is key. Regulation becomes the pedestal on which we are going to anchor laws that will now prevent those kind of conflicts.
Yeah, I want to go back a bit to frameworks for regulation. Do you think that maybe we can have a continental framework? Will that help, maybe under the African Union, to govern drone procurement and its use, as well as exports, maybe to prevent misuse and proliferation?
You see, that one might be a tall order. One, because of if you look at where we are in terms of Africa, there are other areas even we have not been able to think in terms of laws and regulation. So that's why I'm saying this one might be a tall order. But individual African countries first should regulate, because, for example, the airspace of Nigeria cannot be regulated with the same way we are regulating the airspace of Kenya. The same applies to Rwanda and the rest. So first and foremost, if we were to do anything in terms of drones, first we need to harmonize maybe our airspace, because already those are already existing. There are so many existing organizations that regulate our airspace. So I think we should start with that before even going out to drones, because you find that you cannot just invade an airspace of another country without proper regulations. And these ones are there. You even the aeroplanes, you cannot just get another airspace. So I think at the end of the day, first is for individual African countries to have regulations that govern the drones. Then harmonization now can come later.
Okay, drones does not seem to have it all. So if it is not the panacea many believe, what should African militaries and governments prioritize instead in terms of reforming ground forces, intelligence, community engagement?
Up to now, you still have in terms of engagement of ground forces, you still have intelligence, the old ways of intelligence, like the collecting of intelligence, just like we have intelligence, what you call the intelligence groups. For example, you have in Kenya, we have what we call the National Intelligence Service. These are civilian organizations in most countries, but they're not military. But the old ways of collecting intelligence will be overtaken by technology. That is for sure, because you cannot resist technology. So even if you're reforming in terms of collecting intelligence, in terms of solving conflict, I think for me is how you merge the human capital and the technology, so that at the end of the day, you don't over-rely on one, because there's human error, then there is also technology where my technology can fail you. you have merged them in a way to find a common ground in which you are sure, even if maybe you fail on grounds and you fail on human, either way you have intelligence.
All right, Moses, it really is a complicated one, and the work to be done is just barely started. Thank you very much for obliging us and sharing your thoughts.
Okay, welcome, Felicity, and thank you for having me.